Coming up next in This Week in Computer Hardware, NVIDIA's Titan. Is this $990 silent GPU for real? PlayStation 4, Google's high-res Chromebook, some excellent power supplies, and so much more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 206, recorded February 21st, 2013. Titans and Pixels and PlayStations, oh my.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Ting.com. Ting is a new mobile phone service that makes sense. Save money with Ting, pay for what you use, doesn't require a contract, and offers unlimited services on one pooled plan. To save $25 on your first Ting device, visit twitch.ting.com. That's twitch.ting.com.
Hi, I'm Patrick Norton, and welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly program that brings you the most important, most useful, and most edifying news for computer hardware. And of course, we talk about the tablet action too, because apparently tablets and cell phones going to wipe out PCs and Macs eventually. The laughter you hear is Mr. Ryan Shroud, who knows for a fact that gaming will never succumb to phones.
You know, we hear that forever. We've heard, you know, oh, the HPC is dying. And like the review that we're going to talk about at the beginning of this is it's a 7.1 billion transistor part only dedicated to graphics. And it's just like, that's great. Like, that's what we want to see.
You don't want to see the invisible PlayStation 4?
The PlayStation 4 that had...
Maybe
that
4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, that was long.
That was long. And okay, so we know that they're moving to the x86 architecture. They're giving up on expensive custom chips that are difficult to program for. They might be bringing it into the development community a little closer on the PC side of things. Probably using an AMD part, or did they actually announce they're using an AMD part?
They didn't use the word AMD in their press conference officially, but in the media kit that went out after the fact, I think in a table that was mentioned specifically as an 8-core AMD Jaguar-based processor, and AMD something around 2 teraflops of compute power GPU.
Which is pretty impressive when you get right down to it. I don't know. Yeah. I'm curious, right? You know, will there be a Blu-ray player included? What's the performance going to be like? You know, is the online rendering going to be satisfying? Will it finally cause people to buy Vitas so they can start their game on the PlayStation 4 and carry it to the toilet or the bedroom? I'm curious. No price, no ship date, a lot of details missing, and sorry,
they said holiday 2013, okay. Which is as specific as I had ever expected them to get. Like, I think we said maybe last week, I didn't even really expect them to announce this much detail about the hardware. So I just brought up the piece here that looks at the PlayStation 4 specs. 8-core x86 Jaguar, something around 2 teraflop GPU integrated on the same chip, not the same die. 8 gigs of GDDR5 shared memory, and that's maybe the most interesting thing for me, because the current APUs, it's not going to be an APU. They're talking about next generation GCN graphics core next based architecture, which is a discrete solution. So what we're going to see is maybe similar to what you saw on the Xbox 360, where the CPU and the GPU, they're separate die, but they're on the same package, and then they have some shared memory associated with it. What's interesting is that GDDR5 is the same memory that you see on the GTX 660, 680, Titan, the HD 7970, 7950. All those cards are using GDDR5. It's much, much faster than the memory you get in your main system, which is usually DDR3. And if you have an older system, maybe you have some DDR2 still in there. I was not aware that the memory architecture of the Jaguar cores would be able to interface with a GDDR5 memory modules. But apparently that will be the case. Many people, everybody seems to be reporting, anybody that has any technical background on what was actually said while they were there, was that this is a shared 8 gigs of memory that includes frame buffer and includes your system memory, which is plenty. 8 gigs is going to be plenty for a console to do graphics and that kind of stuff where you don't have a bloated kind of operating system behind it to have to worry about. So
Right.
that's probably the most interesting part to me. You know, they didn't talk about clock speeds, but I think like 2 days before this press conference or 4 days before this press conference, AMD did showcased a paper at a computing convention about an 8-core Jaguar system that was running at 1.8 gigahertz or something like that. And it's not obvious, but it's very likely that that's the same CPU that they're going to use in this. And then a 2 teraflops GPU will probably sit somewhere between a 7850 and a 7870, depending on what specific SIMD arrays they're going to use and all that kind of stuff. So a fairly healthy GPU, definitely a big boost over what is in the PS3 or in the Xbox 360 today. Not as good as what you're going to pay in a $500 graphics card today, though, for discrete.
But a huge jump over the existing console graphics systems.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly, but I feel like when the PlayStation 3 was announced, it was announced with a GPU that was equivalent to like a $500 GPU in the discrete market at that time.
Right.
So I don't know if it seems maybe like if that's the case, if I'm remembering correctly, then, you know, they're being a little bit more reserved on specs this time around. Maybe it's not as important to them for their goals for the system. And they want to make sure they don't have any red ring issues. They don't have any stability issues. They don't want to have any of these concerns with support that maybe the last generation of consoles kind of brought to light.
So we're going to talk about another big hardware announcement this week, the Chromebook Pixel, a little bit later. We should talk about probably the biggest news for the gaming audience, because we know there's a lot of you out there who are into the gaming lifestyle, who love the fast GPUs. And if you have $1,000, you are going to be excited. Well, $999 plus tax and shipping if you can't get it on Prime. NVIDIA's GeForce GTX Titan. Ryan's got the preview, the GK110 GPU Boost 2.0. And the man has overclocked this monster. And we should probably start by pointing out that this is a different direction for our friends at NVIDIA, where it's not so much about we're going to build the ultimate amazing fastest processor ever, but we're going to build a ridiculously fast processor that is also as quiet as we can make it. And it's kind of interesting. The Titan, a chip that comes from the supercomputer market, suddenly starts showing up in a significantly less package designed for gaming PCs when you get right down to it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, it's a huge chip. It's literally twice the transistor count of a GTX 680. Not twice the gaming performance, but twice the transistor count. There's some double precision stuff in there. This card's going to be much better for GPU compute type stuff than the 600 series was. The idea that you brought up about they were targeting what they call it, an acoustic experience. Tom was actually here in our studio today, and he gave the whole spiel, and then we went through some benchmarks and did some gaming and some demos. But the acoustic experience, that's what they wanted to target this time around. And it's an interesting idea. And I will say that through my initial week or so with the product and while doing the writing, I kind of was on the fence on whether or not I felt that was a relevant thing, because if you're buying a $1,000 graphics card, my mindset was you want the most performance you can get for that $1,000 graphics card wuthout having to do anything, right? Chances are, if you're an overclocker, if you're a tweaker, somebody who's gonna worry about getting an extra 5 or 10% out of your product, you're probably not buying a $1,000 GPU. You're gonna buy a $300 one and try to overclock it that way. That's a stereotype, and that's not all cases, but that's kind of what was my general consensus. The idea of an acoustic-based experience is, we talked about GPU boost before, and it'll adjust clock speeds and voltages and that kind of stuff on the GPU on the fly while you were playing in order to attempt to get the best performance possible based on power consumption. The new version of GPU Boost that's debuting in the Titan it tries to maintain a particular temperature, and then you can move that target temperature around. So the default is 80 C, and you can move it up or down. And this graph that Burke's showing on the screen now shows that the Titan is actually quieter than a 680, and then much, much quieter than an HD 7970, both single card, triple card, whatever configuration you want to get into. And in my testing, the two Titans in SLI are actually quieter than a single GTX 680. So they did a good job with the cooler and all that. The video that we did today with Tom, the live stream we did, there was a point in there where I kind of had this light bulb moment where it's the fastest GPU you can buy. It's not the fastest graphics card, but it's the fastest GPU you can buy. And there will be people who want to debate whether or not that's an acceptable outcome for this $999 card. But the idea of GPU-based or temperature-based GPU boost is that, okay, there's two ideal setups, right? One is you're a gamer who's using headphones and the computer sits under your desk and maybe it's 10 feet away. You're not really worried about sound levels, right? You're not worried about the acoustic experience that you have. So if you open up the software, EVGA, Precision X, or Asus, or MSI, or whatever it is, you move that fan speed to a level that you're comfortable with, where you say, you know what, I'm comfortable with 70%. It's louder, but it doesn't bother me. I play with headphones on. And then you adjust. You know, you kind of turn the slider bars all the way up for overclock as much as you can with all the voltage that you can. And you're going to get better performance out of it, and it's going to work out better for you. But however, if you have if you maybe have a gaming machine that sits right next to you, maybe even on your desk, and you use speakers instead of headphones, maybe you've got a nice 5.1 setup in your room or something like that, now you care about acoustics. And what they have pre-built into Titan and what you can do by maybe sliding the fan speeds down a little bit, and you can say, okay, never go above 40%, because when you get to 45 it starts to annoy me, but at 40 I'm fine, but get as much performance out of it as you can at a fan speed at 40%. And it actually turned out to be a pretty compelling idea to me in terms of the flexibility that they're able to offer with this kind of architectural algorithm that they've built.
It's a funny move because NVIDIA has always been about we're faster, and the GPU market has always been around we're faster than them, It's the world's fastest GPU, and it is the world's fastest single GPU card. You know, so you can beat it with a 690, which costs about as much. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if this is the first step in this direction for NVIDIA, or if this is an experiment, a toe in the water. Because one of the things NVIDIA's people suggested was like, hey, it's the boutique manufacturers that they want all of our performance, but they want it in a quieter package. That these people that are buying these $1,500, $3,000 gaming systems, they want all of the performance, and they want an acoustic environment that doesn't irritate the hell out of them. Which is funny because we're so used to being like, let's strap 7 fans on the back of it and overclock the hell out of it. But they're looking at really, really impressively low, sound level measurements. And that was kind of funny to look at like 3 of these cards and knowing that 3 250-watt cards with 3 gigantic parts on them. The die on this thing is ridiculously large, and realizing that I could not hear them standing 2 feet away from the case, and they were doing like triple monitor gaming at a high resolution with some pretty powerful graphics, and I was like, okay, I like it. I can't afford it at $1,000, but I'd be all over it as an option at $300. It's interesting. I think it's going to be exciting to watch. I certainly don't mind the idea of having a quieter part, although it's still going to be sucking down 250 watts, 750 if you triple head that monster, which will be the equivalent of 4 680s, which is kind of frightening to think about. Frame rating update. How is the frame rating testing development going, sir?
So fairly well. So what we were able to do with this review, we didn't include benchmark results from Crossfire, and I knew we were going to get some flack for that, and I wanted to be able to explain why it was. So on the second to last page of the review that went up today on PCPer.com, I kind of addressed why we weren't testing Crossfire. And the reason we didn't test Crossfire, show results for Crossfire, we did a lot of testing with Crossfire, was because of the frame rating system we've been using and the variance in results that we see with our system versus the currently public testing systems that everybody's using. And so what we did today was, if you kind of scroll down that page, so that screenshot you're looking at there is that's a screenshot of, you'll see the overlay on the left-hand side. And, and what's interesting is that it's drawing that purple overlay that you see and the yellow overlay below it is actually, they're drawn on an entire frame, but because of the way, you know, you're drawing multiple frames on the monitor at any given time, you're seeing two columns there. If you scroll down to the next image down, Burke, you'll see another drawing of it, and what you'll happen to see is a maroon line column with a very small silver line and then a small purple line. And that small silver line is the issue, because in Fraps, that shows up as a frame and counts just as much towards your average per second as that maroon portion does.
Oh, interesting.
And that's a problem. And when you watch it in real time, when you watch it in slow motion, you can clearly tell that that sliver is not adding to the smoothness of the animation on the screen. And so we were able to show that for the first time. And then you start looking at these graphs. So that graph that where you got up there now shows the top two lines happen to be 7970 Crossfire, 7970 SLI. And they look pretty close, right? You know, 7970 Crossfire is a little bit better, but the green line of 680 SLI is a little bit under, but pretty good. Now, if you go to the next graph down, that is the data that we calculate based on our stuff. And what we have done is essentially any frame that is under a certain threshold of pixel height, so like that silver, that silver one, we remove from it. We say, you know what, that frame shouldn't count because it's not positively affecting the game experience in any fashion. So we remove those frames.
But it's positively affecting the benchmark scores, Brian.
Exactly.
Who cares about game experience? It's about higher frame rates. You can tell your friend you have higher frame rates.
And it's so interesting now that I was able to show those screenshots and say, look, for years people have said it feels like this. I don't understand why, but it feels like this. And you know, that's a pretty good visual representation of it. So if you go through that page, there's a whole lot more data there in terms of graphs where we compare what we gathered from Fraps, what we gathered from the frame rating capture. We zoom in a little bit and you see these. If you go down two more slides, Burke, I think you'll see a graph that looks like a bunch of, that kind of stuff. One more down. You'll see this really dramatic seesawing and what we're looking at are frame times. So the lower, the better, but you want it to be smooth and consistent. And that graph that kind of looks like, I don't even know, like a seesaw pattern is not anywhere near consistent and smooth. And that is, you know, that's a big frame, small frame, big frame, small frame, big frame, small frame. Whereas the green line that's kind of hidden behind it, kind of obscured behind it, is 680s and SLI. And it's a little bit slower if you actually average those frames times out, but it's a much smoother experience, and it doesn't have any of the jitteries and stutters and that kind of stuff. So there's some more screenshots on there, more graphs and that kind of stuff, and hopefully, depending on what the reaction is to this, very shortly we'll be able to kind of produce and showcase all of our results from this, from mini games and other configurations and that kind of stuff. So it has definitely gotten the attention of the community. We've been getting a lot of feedback from that, and I can keep an eye on what forums are talking about it and that kind of stuff, and what other reviewers and that kind of stuff are talking about it. And it's definitely gotten attention.
And attention is good.
Yeah,
It'll be interesting to hear about
the goal is we want them to fix this. We want them to make it as good of an experience as possible. So anytime we can point out these flaws, AMD's not happy about it. But they're there. And the sad part is their single GPU configurations are great. They're faster than the NVIDIA cards. But when you do multi-GPU, you start to run into those issues.
It's time to fix them, AMD. Ryan Shrout is calling you out with love. Taking an accurate look at SSD write endurance. Interesting article from Alan Malventano up on PCPro.com. I'm just going to read the lead graph, and I'm going to point you towards it. It says, last year I posted a rebuttal to a paper describing the future of flash memory is bleak. The paper went through great and convoluted lengths to paint a tragic picture of flash memory endurance moving forward. Yesterday, a newer paper hit Slashdot, this one doing just the opposite and going as far as to assume production flash memory handling up to 1 million erase cycles. You'd think that since I'm constantly pushing flash memory as a viable, reliable, and super fast successor to hard drives, aka spinning rust, Alan can turn a phrase, can he? That I just sit back on this one and let it fly. After all, it helps to make my argument. Well, I can't, because if there are errors published on a topic so important to me, it's in the interest of journalistic integrity that I now must post an equal and opposite rebuttal to this one, even if it works against my case. Alan is entirely too honest, even for his own good. So the paper in question, which Alan links to and wants you to read through, the SSD write endurance considered ... sufficient. So basically, it's an interesting, basically, quote, all of the formulas, while correct, fail to consider the most important factor in dealing with flash memory writes, which is write amplification. And it's interesting, these people running these big, gigantic, epic monologues, screeds, I guess I'm going to say, about why flash memory sucks. Like the first one, I think, was referring to papers from 1,000 years ago. But the idea is that, well, you know what? I'm going to send you to the article, because if write amplification is a new concept to you, and if the idea of discussing, you know, it's just it's
life cycles of NAND are complicated. To say the least.
Writing to NAND is complicated, and writing to NAND and how you write information to a NAND drive, how SSD controllers kind of bundle writes together to make things move faster. It gets really interesting, because eventually you fill up the SSD drive and you have to basically empty the cell and rewrite to it again. I should say flash block, not cell, or Alan will start texting my phone or jump into the chat room being like, "You fool," which is fundamentally accurate. It's a really, really interesting read. It will really, really expand your knowledge of how SSD works and how SSD reliability is measured, and you know how concerned you should or shouldn't be about replacing your spinning rust with an SSD. It's good stuff. People, check it out. And it's highly educational, especially if you want to get into the it's just, I'm going to stop here because we got a whole bunch to talk about. One more thing before we go, actually, to thank one of our sponsors, a crowdfunded mini-ITX case. This is cool, actually.
Yeah.
This is a Kickstarter project, and Burke will pull this one up. It's a beautiful Kickstarter project. Wait, is it crowd design or is it actually Kickstartered?
So it's actually on Indiegogo. So what happened was these two guys were on a thread in the Hard OCP forums, and they were talking back and forth about what they would want in an ideal mini-ITX case. And somebody said, why don't you just make one? So somebody had the capability to do some really high quality CAD drawings. They've actually been talking with Leanne Lee. Leanne Lee's going to build a prototype. So the funding they're doing to now, they've actually already met it and actually exceeded it by a lot, I think, was to have the prototypes built, shipped, get the equipment to test them, and then eventually, hopefully, maybe one day turn them into mass production units. They were looking for $3,000. They have $6,800 now, and they have 22 days left on there. So it's pretty cool. I mean, like, they're talking specs to include water cooling for graphics cards. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Be able to fit a GTX 690 in there, so 12.5-inch graphics cards if you want to, in a pretty sleek mini ITX design. There's no window in the side. That's kind of the one drawback some people were commenting, but they don't have a window. Well,
no.
Some people say if you're going to jam everything in there, like, I think it would be cool if you have a super high-end graphics card like that to have like a little window where you can see the glowy bits inside.
That's when case modding comes in.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
I'm done with Windows getting scratched. Sorry, it may just be my computing environment, but it's
no, that's
to the windows
that's
in the
fair.
side of the PC case. It's so 1997.
You can always cut holes out of doors. You can't necessarily put them back in.
Exactly.
It does have support for like water cooled, up to a 240 millimeter radiator for the CPU cooler inside this design.
Beautiful. I mean, I got to say, as somebody who's punched open a lot of cases, a lot of computer cases, I am really impressed with the way they managed to kind of, you know, Rubik's Cube or however you want to figure it. It's just really impressive. Looking at where the ATX power supply is and the fans and the SSD mount. I mean, it's really cool. If nothing else, if you want to have a really good think about how cases are laid out, maybe about how cases could be laid out in a slightly different and more thoughtful world, that alone is worth going over to indiegogo.com/project/ncase-m1-prototype. And props to them. We got the link in the show notes. $6,816 raised on their $300 goal, and they're talking about selling this for $160 to $200 US retail, and some awesome human hit the $2,000 prototype. One prototype will be yours after the prototype testing is completed, which is pretty awesome. You can basically, for $10, you can get on the early shipment list. Well, the first early shipment list is sold out. The second early shipment list is still filling up. That'll be like April 2013 delivery. I'm just excited. Excited.
I love this idea where people in forums, enthusiasts, they go, hey, you know what? We don't like any of this stuff. Let's make our own and let's make it the best that there is. And, we'll obviously have to get one and test it and see if they actually produce it, if it turns out to be that way. But there's a lot to be said for having, let's say, boots on the ground people design this product as opposed to somebody in a lab somewhere, modifying something that they've worked on for a decade. Yeah.
Well, it's pretty. I like how they put in the option for the optical drive. I like how the SSD is nestled in place. It's just really, when you want to replace something, you might have to pull half the machine apart, but I'm good with that, especially with the water cooling option built in. That's probably enough for a case, even for Ryan and Patrick. We get excited. It's a beautiful case. Makes me want to basically build another PC. And my wife's going to stop speaking to me. We should take a moment to thank our wonderful sponsor. This, ladies and gentlemen, looks like a Sprint modem, but is actually on Ting. If you're not familiar with Ting, well, Ryan, you want to tell us a little bit about it? I have 4G from Sprint, and I paid $6 last month for it. How cool is that?
So a lot of people maybe had never heard of Ting, don't really know what it is. It is as they claim, a no BS mobile service. It's an MVNO. It's a reseller of the nationwide Sprint network, hence why you have the Sprint logo on that modem. So Ting is different in a lot of ways. There's no contracts. There's no early termination fees. It's truly and completely contract-free. No ETFs, no other BS. There's no bundling. There's no ride-along services. You choose your service levels from like extra small to extra, extra large. And it's for voice minutes, text messages, and megabytes of data. And they're all billed separately, right? So you don't have to, and they're not like tiered at certain levels or anything like that. So you actually are only going to pay for the data you want to use. There's no overage charges. If you use more than you thought you would, you just pay for what you used. Here's the best part: credits on unused service. If you used less than you thought you would, Ting drops you down to the level you hit and credits the difference on your next bill. You don't have to, and they do that automatically. That's not like you have to call and complain. How many times have I gotten a bill where, I have 1,000 minutes and I use 250 and I didn't get any credits for that. I didn't get any benefit for that. No add-ons. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, because it's really cool. You can get the least expensive $6 a month plan, and it's maybe, let's say for a modem, 100 megabytes. I apologize for not knowing it off the top of my head. If I upload several gigabytes, I get charged for that, but it's not like I'm getting charged $10 a megabyte.
Yeah.
Like you know what I mean? Like there's no brutal punishment for going over your plan. They just bump you up to the next lowest plan. And if you go beyond that, they bump you up to the next lowest plan. So you don't have to pay a whole lot of money, because when I was originally with Sprint, I was paying $60 a month if I used 3 gigabytes of data or if I used 3 megabytes of data in a month. And with the Ting plan, I basically charge a minimum amount of money. They have a really cool calculator on Ting.com, and you can punch in your current service and compare it to what that service would cost you on Ting, and you might find a shocking amount of savings to be yours. It's pretty cool. There's an online account control panel that makes it really easy to set things up, to basically look at your billing and to take a really exacting look at your usage. Customer support's pretty basic. 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a real person will pick up the phone at the 1-800 number or the 1-855 number. Ting.com, help.ting.com for support. There's a visual startup guide, tutorials that walk you through things. The thing that kind of makes this different, though, is that you will be buying your hardware up front. They actually have a beta
Right.
program running right now if you want to bring your own Sprint hardware. But instead of the phone company making ridiculous amounts of bank off of you by committing you to a multi-year contract, and you know, this phone is only $99, but you're going to pay us, you know, $3 or $4 grand over the next couple of years. What Ting does is like, hey, own it, buy the phone, buy the modem, buy the USB drive. Then you activate it with Ting, and you can, you know, use your existing phone number, port an existing phone number, get a new phone number, basically select your plan based on minutes, messages, megabytes, and Ting bills you. And it's just awesome. It's really, I can have the modem I need for emergencies without being like, there's another giant chunk of money down the phone every month, or down the phone, another giant chunk of money down the phone every month. It's cool. If you haven't been there, do us a favor, check it out. Twitch, TWICH, twitch.ting.com. It's awesome. Save money, better manage your mobile phone usage with Ting. Check out the savings calculator if you haven't. See how much you or your company can save. And if you sign up using that twitch.ting.com URL, you're going to save $25 on your first Ting device when you sign up, which could make this incredibly affordable.
Very cool.
It's amazing how much you can spend on a phone or a modem if you're not careful.
Yeah, it is. Wireless can be expensive, and it's nice to see that there's a company that's willing to work with people on a very upfront basis on this type of stuff. You got to pay for it, but you're going to pay for only what you're going to use, and the prices are really good. So we definitely thank Ting for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware.
I bought it with my own money, people, and I'm happy. If you haven't seen it, we mentioned it earlier in the show, Google is moving a slightly different direction in the Chromebook. Chromebook has been hugely popular on Amazon.com. I want to say the Samsung Chromebook. It's cheap. It's running the Chrome operating system. It's all about storing your stuff in the cloud. If you haven't, check out the Chromebook Pixel. They dropped this kind of out of the blue. I'm going to read straight from the announcement. With the Pixel, we set out to rethink elements of a computer in order to design the best laptop possible, especially for power users, which is something you don't usually think about with the Chromebooks, who have fully embraced the cloud. Chrome's philosophy has always been to minimize. Now, I'm not reading exactly. The philosophy of Chrome has always been to minimize the Chrome of the browser, in much the same way the goal of the Pixel is to make the pixels disappear, giving people the best web experience. Now, if this sounds familiar, it should, because this is a shot across the bow of Apple from their friends at Google. Quote, this Chromebook has the highest pixel density, 239 pixels per inch of any laptop screen on the market today. This is not cheap like the other Chromebooks. This is a sophisticated piece of design. It is a gorgeous looking piece of hardware. I suspect the screen is going to look magnificent. It's a Core i5 CPU, so it's going to be fast. And it's touchscreen. So it's kind of a shot across the Windows 8 bow, too. It's like, Windows 8, you want a touch screen? Yeah, we can do that. You know why? Because we do tablets, and we do phones, and we do a lot of them. It's still all about the Chrome operating system and cloud storage. You get a 1 terabyte Google Drive included in the price. And it's not cheap. It's really not cheap.
Yeah.
It is $1,300, which is Apple MacBook Air money. So
But it's not,
really curious.
but if you look at the Retina screen, it's like if you compare it to the Retina MacBook Pro,
okay,
it's significantly less.
Possibly even half as much.
Right. I would be, because we were talking about this earlier today here at the office, and I thought, can I get that and maybe install Windows on it and do something like, okay, I'm going to put a real operating system on it now. Thanks for the lower cost Retina display and hardware. Here's Windows 8. Let's go to town on that. The problem is you're limited to the 32 gig storage right now.
Right. Unless you can upgrade the storage. And they're not, shockingly enough, they're not being real specific about whether it's an MSD, whether it's soldered onto the motherboard, whether you can replace it without having access to a clean room. I kid slightly. I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes, because unlike, say, the Nexus, the Nexus 4, it is not already sold out, right? So it's been up for several hours, and they're still taking orders. And they're talking about it shipping in 3 to 5 days. So that either means they're in some sort of production environment where they has all the Chromebooks that they need to be produced in China to fulfill the desire of the people's or they're not selling that many of them. Because I remember with the Nexus 4, Roger Chang, my beloved, long-suffering BlackBerry using series producer on Techzilla, he was fighting for hours to try to pre-order his Nexus phone when it came out, because their websites were crashing and falling, and 32,000 people were all trying to order phones at the same time. So this, either they've learned a lot from that launch, or they're just not selling as many of these.
I don't know if I understand this particular this hardware looks awesome. The operating system on it, I'm not sure makes a lot of sense, right? Like, it's got an Ivy Bridge processor in it. So why do I'm running web apps. Why do I need to have an Ivy Bridge part in it?
And maybe that's where the whole argument for the Chromebook Pixel completely falls apart. Or maybe there's going to be apps. Maybe those photo editing apps that are available on the
I would like one of those.
Are more sophisticated than we thought. I mean, it's interesting.
Like, this would be a good machine. Like, well, I mean, you could do it with anything. But I was like, okay, you can. Would I buy this and take it with me on short trips for work where I just am taking pictures? I import the pictures, edit them, and make news. I was like, well, what program do I use to do that? Surely there's some photo editing apps on the Chrome store, but I don't know.
Maybe.
Burke, don't click it. Don't click it, Burke. Don't do it. It seems like a good deal from a hardware side, but I question the integration with Chrome OS. So I don't know.
We will wait with bated breath. Maybe there are going to be some exciting new Chrome OS apps that are enabled by the higher. Well, maybe there are Chrome OS apps that are power demanding that we just haven't found that would run perfectly well on a Core i5 or a Core i7 Windows box. I don't know. We wait with
anybody that's got answers, email us and let us know. I would love to see where you think this might be useful in this as it is presented by Google. Not how you would modify it, but as it is presented by Google.
What's the email address for that?
That email address would be twitch@twit.tv, TWICH@twit.tv, which you can also email us any other questions, statements, comments, corrections you might have. And we may read some of them on the show like we're going to do right now.
I'm laughing because I found ChromeOSApps.org, and it's like the top 5 lifestyle apps. Insta Craigslist, Kitchen King, Prayer of the Day. I'm not seeing a lot of Core i5 sucking applications yet. Insta9 Gag, Groove Shark Downloader, Idea Mapper.
Yeah.
At John Crakes tweeted in, I'm in search of a power supply. At Patrick Norton, at Ryan Trout, the power supply just died on my 4-year-old Dell with an Intel 920. I'm looking for something to set it up and is future ready. Perfect timing, because we were actually talking about power supplies, PSUs on Techzilla earlier this week. For me, I'd probably aim for a 5 or 650 or 600 watt power supply, unless you're planning on going crazy with the GPUs in the near future, in which case I'd start looking at 750 watts. Unless, of course, you're looking at the Titans and you're thinking I need 3 of those, and that's 750 watts right there, because each Titan is brace yourselves, 250 watts per board. My short list for well under $100. Check out the Seasonic M12 11 620 bronze, which is a really nice power supply for the money. Corsair's CM PSU 650TX and their Builder Series 6 CX500. If you're thinking about adding a high-power GPU, I'd aim for 650 over the 500-watt power supply. But that Builder Series CX500 sells for a meager $58. For a little bit more money, Corsair's TX 550M has a stellar rep. It's $109. If you want to get fancy, Kingwin's fanless Kingwin SCR 500 is a 500-watt power supply with 0 dBs. It is the silent one. Sorry, I get excited. And if you want to kind of learn the background about what makes a good power supply and why maybe that $75 case that included a power supply, maybe you should just sell that power supply immediately and buy a proper one. Go to hardocp.com. They do some amazing benchmarking of power supply units, and I leaned on them heavily in my research for that story.
Cool.
Yeah, Seasonic's doing good stuff. Corsair's doing good stuff. Some of the Kingwin stuff's good stuff, and all extremely affordable. And in many cases, they have like 500, 650, 750 watt, 1,000 watt versions of those power supplies. Matt's got a question about a combo gaming and Hackintosh build. He says, "Hey guys, I'm putting together a new gaming rig this tax season. I'm wondering if it would be possible to set up a second hard disk drive as a Hackintosh OS X boot drive in addition to my Windows hard disk drive. i5 3570K, Asus Z77 motherboard, GTX 670 for the win edition are the main components I'm using." Sorry, I added in the for the win because the other thing you say for FTW is profoundly inappropriate for a family-friendly show. Can you run a Hackintosh on an Asus Z77?
You can. Yeah, you definitely can. It's not the preferred method in the Hackintosh community. Most people try to use Gigabyte motherboards for that. You can use Asus, you can use MSI boards. There just may be a couple of other drivers you have to install, a couple of other little quirks. Gigabyte boards are just the best supported by the Hackintosh community. For whatever reason on how it started, it's continued down that trend. It might be that Gigabyte is still one of the last ones to include FireWire on almost all of their motherboards as well. But you can definitely, all that hardware will work, and you can definitely hook up a second hard drive and use it as a Hackintosh OS X build. And I can't remember what the name of the, of what the bootloader is in Hackintosh. It's from Tony Mac x86. I don't know remember the name of the bootloader tool is, but
Chimera or Chameleon?
It doesn't sound right either. I don't know. I don't remember. But if you have two hard drives in there, the bootloader will recognize them, and you can set which one you want to default and then change on boot. What I would recommend is put one hard drive in, install Windows, or actually I'd install Mac OS first and do your Hackintosh build, get all that out of the way, take that hard drive out, take the other hard drive, put it in, install Windows, and get them both kind of running separately. You don't have to take them out and stuff, but disconnect the SATA cable so you don't accidentally do anything that you're not supposed to do. And then when all that's ready and you're happy with it, turn it back on, set the Mac OS drive as your primary, let it go into its bootloader and see what it sees. It should be able to kind of detect the hard drive, search for an operating system, and give you those options at that point. I don't think you have to reinstall anything for that to occur.
And Chimera, I believe, is the bootloader name we're looking for.
Yeah, there you go.
So, yeah, it's Chimera with the ever so.
And that's really the best way,
Chameleon,
in my opinion, to use a Hackintosh. You know, because especially if it's just a project for you, it's not something where you're going to depend on it every day. Is have the ability to switch back and forth. You can play games on Windows. You can mess around with whatever production applications you might have that you're using on Mac, that kind of thing.
It's a good thing. TonyMacX86.com is pretty much the center of incredibly useful information for that Hackintosh build. One last question before we go. John's got a question about a GPU upgrade. He says, "Hey, Twitch, love you guys. Thanks for what you do." Thank you, John. "I'm helping a friend upgrade his computer right now, and I am running into a video card comparison issue where I find it difficult to do direct comparisons for NVIDIA SLI. Currently, he's running two GeForce 9600 GT 1 gigabytes in the SLI. The thought is to sell both and upgrade to one newer card like an NVIDIA 660 Ti or 670. We haven't quite decided yet. Any input would be welcome. Would this be a large jump in performance going to only one modern card over his older SLI setup, or would it just be a smaller incremental improvement? Thanks."
So, okay. The architecture is not directly comparable, but the 9600 has 64 cores in it, 64 shaders. They're running at 650 megahertz. If he upgrades to like a 670, he's talking about 1,366 cores. I guess, is that what it is? Something like that. It's in the thousands. It's in the 1,000 range. So
run that by me one more time. How many cores to how many cores?
So a single 9600 GT has 64 CUDA cores. Okay. Now, the CUDA cores are not directly comparable. They change and shift around a lot. But I think it's pretty obvious that when you look at a GTX 670, it has 1,344 CUDA cores.
I'm thinking there will be a ginormous ass kicking of the GeForce 9600s and SLI.
Yeah.
That it will be noticeable. That is not as it will not be a subtle increase. It will be a massive game experience altering, lifestyle changing event, and that you might worry about your friend not leaving his machine for days as he rediscovers video games that look entirely differently now that he can actually just feed ridiculous numbers of pixels into his 1080p monitor.
If I had to guess based on just the specs that look at texture fill rate, memory bandwidth, that kind of stuff, you're probably looking at a 2 to 3x performance going from SLI 9600s to a single GTX 670. Yeah. He's waited long enough. It's time for him to upgrade. That's and he'll definitely be able to tell. It's not like, oh, I moved from a 570 to a 670. There's some change, but not a whole lot or something like that. This will be life altering, I guess.
The best thing about waiting multiple years between hardware upgrades is that when you finally do upgrade, it is noticeable and you feel good about the money you spent. So we're going to have to wrap this week in computer hardware before we get too much farther along, before the internets break down on both of us. Ryan, what's coming up on PC Per this week?
A lot more of that frame rating stuff, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view. For readers, fortunately, for me, having to deal with the largest Excel files I have ever seen in my entire life and trying to make it. You know, you hear the jokes about using Excel as a benchmark, and you might think, that's stupid. Why would you ever want to do that?
Until you see somebody with like 32,000 pivot tables because they have the entire business history of an organization mapped out in multiple layers of Excel.
I have a 10 megabyte Excel file. It doesn't sound that big, but that's 10 megs of data points.
That's huge.
Not images or anything like that. 10 megs of data points. And when I set up some indirect references, which I learned about, which allows you to shift a whole bunch of cells by changing a single cell. And when that happens, my CPU usage on my Ivy Bridge quad core spikes up for a little bit, and I have to sit there for a second and wait. And I'm like, this is kind of crazy. This is kind of crazy. So that's what I get to deal with. We have other stuff. We have some motherboard reviews coming up. We're taking a look at the new 140 millimeter Corsair hydro coolers. So we'll be able to talk about those next week as well.
Excellent. We're going to be lighting hard drives on fire, looking at portable wireless hard drives for your tablets and phone books. And we might even be answering a few viewer questions this week on Techzilla. That's going to about do it for this episode of Twitch This Week in Computer Hardware. If you're new to the show, do us a favor. Come check out all of our older episodes. twit.tv/Twitch. TWICH is the place to go. Email your questions to us at Twitch, TWICH@twit.tv. And that is it for this episode of Twitch. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Trout.
We'll see you next week.